What's going on, everybody? It's the one and only Q from Retro Q Gaming here, and you're going to be hearing a very different Q here tonight. And no, I'm not saying that just because I've got a slightly sore throat, but no. We're going to look more at someone who doesn't show up here too often. We're going to talk about, let's call him Dejected Q. Now you may be wondering, Q, what have you got to be dejected about? You are an amazing guy, everybody loves you, your charisma's off the charts, you roll a plus 20, all on that stuff. You've got an amazing life, everything about you is fantastic, you have a great PC, you have an excellent motorbike, everything you need to do. What could ever dissuade you from being the paragon of everything that you are? Well, boyos. Today is a rare day. Today is probably one of the maybe 3 days in the last 5 or 6 years, or even further back that I can recall at all, where I have had to admit defeat. I know. I know you heard that correctly. You heard that correctly. Now, as everyone knows here, I am never wrong. But sometimes something beyond my control, the realization, the crushing realization of something I knew was coming. I knew was going to happen. Even though you know it's coming, you know it's going to happen. When it does, it still hits you like a kick in the nuts. Now, what am I talking about? Well, just earlier today, I finished playing The Outer Worlds. I love The Outer Worlds, it's a great game. But after that, by the way, I was playing The Outer Worlds at 1440p, completely maxed out. And yes, I was getting consistently over 60 FPS. It was great. And then, once I finished that, I decided, due to another game becoming, let's call it, available to me earlier on today, I decided I would play said game. Now that game is what you're seeing here, Borderlands 3. That's right, Borderlands 3 is now available to me. Let's just leave it at that, shall we? But here's the thing. We all know from everything we've seen over the last 2 or 3 months, whenever it was, since Borderlands released on the Epic Games Store, and even the pre-release stuff, the benchmarks that were run, etc. and all, I knew my 1080 Founders Edition wasn't going to cut it in the way I would like. Now, the way I would like, as we all know, is maxed out 1440p with a minimum of a consistent 60 FPS. More is better, of course, because unlike what plebs will tell you, the human eye can not only see 24 frames per second, we can see a glorious, buttery smooth, silky smooth 120, 140, 144 for that matter, 165, 240, and even 300 frames per second. But I digress. Now, when I was playing Control earlier this year, that's right, Control, because that also became available to me about 3 hours after release, hint hint, but I knew Control was a bit of a demanding game. Now, in the case of Control, I had to turn two settings from completely maxed out down to high. Or I think in that one they went high as the highest ones, and I turned them down one notch. But I did that in order to maintain above 60 FPS with a proper quality. And Control worked well in that regards. Now, however, here's where we run into the problem. Borderlands 3. Now, for all intents and purposes, Borderlands 3 is an extremely unoptimized game. We knew this going in, we knew this when it was launched, and we knew this just before it actually released as well. But I'm not going to use that as a crutch, I'm not going to use that as a scapegoat. We knew the game was wildly unoptimized. However, at the same time, I also knew my 1080 Founders Edition was just not going to cut it. Now, what do I mean when it's not cutting it? Well, we're talking, and this is going to kill me to say this, absolutely kill me to say this. We're going to talk, we're talking even mostly high with one or two settings at ultra in order to get 1440p, minimum 60 FPS. Now that's unacceptable to me in a game like Borderlands 3. Absolutely unacceptable for me in Borderlands 3. So, what kills me is now, after waiting all this time for Borderlands 3 to become available, I have to wait to play Borderlands 3. Playing it on a console is completely out of the question. The main reason I personally PC game is because I want the best looking games, and I want the highest resolutions and the smoothest frame rates all at once. Not to mention the best control input device of my choosing, be it mouse and keyboard in the case of first person shooters like this. But I play for all of that. So to do otherwise would defeat the purpose. Now, I'm not going to say right now that I'm committing to building a new PC. That would just be kind of silly right now. However, we do know it is going to happen eventually, but I'm not going to commit to it right now. But Borderlands 3 is my new, what will we call it? It's my new Doom 2016. It's my new Half-Life 2. I'll explain that now. You might be wondering what I mean by that. So, if you've been around for a while, you already know what my old PC was. It was something I built it was either the end of 2011 or the start of 2012. It had an Intel i6 2600K, which still, to this day, runs rings around the Xbox One X and every single console out there. And it has a GTX 690, also a GPU that runs rings around every version of the base consoles, because obviously the Xbox One X does have a bit of a better GPU in some regards. But my old PC, even to this day, still gets better performance in every single game in both visuals, resolution, and frame rate at the same time than the base consoles. Except for in one particular game, because that particular game has a specific issue running with a GTX 690. That game being Doom 2016, by the way. But Doom 2016, I decided to try on that GPU just for fun. I knew I already had the computer built, my new current computer built at the time. I was just waiting for the 1080 to arrive. The Doom launched about 2 weeks before my 1080. But when I played that, because of the issues with the GPU, even at medium settings, I was getting like 30 FPS. Just because there's a specific issue with it. So, because of that, it was just night and day. Night and day that I had to do it. Now, I don't know if I mentioned it earlier actually, but I also was going to say Arkham Knight. Now, at first when Arkham Knight launched, I decided, I ran Arkham Knight on launch night. I had a free copy that I got from a friend, and I ran it, and it ran like absolute dirt. Now, it turns out that, at the time, we didn't know it ran like absolute dirt. Right at launch, just as it happened, we didn't know. And I was doing that, and I remember messaging a friend of mine and said, listen, I have to build a new PC. Arkham Knight is the game that broke the camel's back. And then, of course, an hour later, it turns out the game was just a disaster. But, yeah, Doom would have pushed that if I wasn't already in the midst and 2 weeks away from finishing the computer. But Arkham Knight was also one of those moments. And I mentioned it before as well. Half-Life 2, believe it or not, was also one of those games. Now, Half-Life 2 is the one that made me build my first gaming PC. Because I had a crappy little student-style PC that my mother had bought me back in like 2001 or whenever it was. And of course, it was a budget PC. It had a GeForce 2 MX400. Not a very good GPU in any way, shape, or form. And it absolutely struggled and was dire to play Half-Life 2. That's right. And of course, I had been dying for Half-Life 2 for years at that point. So when Half-Life 2 did come out, and I struggled so badly to play it on there, I decided I was going to build my first gaming PC. Now, that's, of course, 15 years ago or so? So we've come a considerable long way from there. But my point being, with that rambly story and all, is that Borderlands 3 is basically the game that is pushing me, or it's the jumping off point, if you will, for officially planning or whatever you want to call it, to make a new PC. Now, I say that because, like I've always said within the last couple of months, I will hopefully be building a new one at the start of next year, because hopefully, I doubt it's going to happen, but Nvidia will launch their new RTX 3080 Ti series right before Cyberpunk 2077. Hint, hint, Nvidia. Because I know I'm going to need a proper upgrade for that. But Borderlands has really brought it in beforehand. So despite the wildly unoptimized game and the engine, because, well, Gearbox or Gearbox, yeah, I just can't play Borderlands like this. I just can't do it. So that's it. That's all I can say. What will my new computer be? Well, I want to say it's going to be an RTX 3080 Ti. That's a given. That is a 100% given, or a 2180 Ti, whatever they go with next. That is an absolute given. That is the standard. Or whatever's going to be the highest level. Maybe they don't launch a Ti. Maybe they just launch a 3080 or a 2180. It will be that, absolutely. CPU wise, as it stands at the moment, from what we see and what we know, it will be what is it? I think the Intel 9900KS, the new special edition one, is the current king. That could all change with the Ryzen 3950X. We'll have to wait and see. Building a new computer is a little bit of a while off, but that's the kind of thing we're looking at anyway. Again, it's going to be top end. That's why I personally PC game. But we'll see. We'll see how it all plays out. We'll see how the GPU market goes in the meantime. We'll see how the CPU market goes in the meantime. And that's basically it. In the meantime, though, I have to wait. And that, boyos, is going to kill me.